All right, Mr. Sabio. So before we get started, let's talk about how we met. You came highly recommended from Bobby Bunch.
Yes.
Yes,
Phenomenal guy.
and what?
He's a phenomenal guy.
Phenomenal indeed. Yes, we speak like every other night over the phone. And I was like, who should I interview else? And he's like, Sabio. And I'm like, all right, man. And I'm like, I'll do it. And he said a lot of good things about you. So introduce yourself for the audience that does not know you.
Sure. My name is Tony Sabio. I spent a lot of time in the military, in the Marine Corps, and then moved into the Secret Service. Worked under Bush's detail on the SWAT team, canine SWAT handler, and then in 2007 got recruited into the CIA. And in the CIA, I was part of a team called GRS, Global Response Staff, and then finished my time there with my last 3 years for a total of 11 as a counterintelligence officer dealing with the Gulf region. And then currently right now, I own my own business and do a lot of entrepreneur stuff overseas, really dealing in a niche area. A lot of things, if people find themselves in a bad situation, I'm kind of the person they call.
So, how long did you work for the CIA?
11 years.
Okay, because Bobby worked about 15. How did you meet Bobby?
So I met Bobby through GRS. It was a weird situation. You know, he was a corpsman also, and we kind of clicked together. He worked also in the protective operations group. We met through that. He did a lot of things on the director side, with myself being in operations of GRS. He also did trips as a GRS agent supporting. So it started off as a just by chance encounter, doing operations together, and then just grew from there.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and as you said, Bobby's a great guy. And he highly recommended you. And I looked at your LinkedIn page, and I'm like, yes, I will definitely interview this guy. Well, Bobby also worked in he worked in the office of the Inspector General too, so a lot of
Yes.
internal affairs work. Which your job does not seem as like internal affairs based. It seems like more like boots on the ground type of work, right?
Yeah.
Between SWAT at the Secret Service for Bush and global response service, and you said Marines, correct?
Marines and counterintelligence.
Right. So it's a lot of boots on the ground stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about counterintelligence. What does that mean?
So counterintelligence is really dealing with who's trying to infiltrate us as the United States government, who's trying to gain secrets against us, try to get people to work for them against the United States. And then we also do offensive, where there's certain things that we need to know about host countries or any other countries we may be dealing with, and we try to do the same thing. So it's a lot of your cloak and dagger. It's more of a gentleman's type of atmosphere where each intelligence agency works together, but you really don't work totally together. And that's where you try to figure out, okay, what angles are they trying to do in this joint operation? Because it's all about their own country, what's in it for them. We do it to the Brits, they do it to us, but it's more of a friendly. There's not a very much of an adversarial thing. They like to know what we're doing. We like to know what they're doing. But you also have the ones that are state-sponsored countries, such as Hezbollah with Lebanon. Those areas, they're very aggressive, and they utilize whatever intel they can gather from you against you. And normally it's to kill Americans, sad to say. That is at the higher stakes. So dealing with the Gulf Group region, I really dealt with more of the terrorist, state-sponsored locations, and really protecting our interests and protecting our people.
So with state-sponsored attackers, right? So first thing that's going to come to mind is China, Russia, right?
Yeah.
So was that the majority of your work?
Well, China and Russia is more dealing with they're not going to straight have terrorist acts against Americans. So state-sponsored terrorist groups will be more of like Iran. It'll be Hezbollah. Hamas is definitely state-sponsored, meaning the terrorist group is embedded within the government. It's part of it. It's led by. The Russians don't necessarily they don't do that to us, only because it's more of their economic and global game, where a true state-sponsored group that wants to do harm against American interests is really just looking to destroy. So there's two different aspects of that. China would be more going into better themselves as far as a world power, but they don't want to go into a direct conflict or war with the United States.
So again, you did a lot in your career.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with Bobby. You guys did both a lot in your career. Now, with regards to your Secret Service work too, right? You did SWAT work for Bush's protective detail. Now, I've interviewed a ton of people on different protective details, like so many different ones, like Bill Clinton's bodyguard, Jimmy Carter's bodyguard, people that worked in the Secret Service, whatever. So, and I had Bob Porras on, right? And he also,
I know Bob very well.
Ninja.
Yeah,
yeah, awesome guy. It's funny because he reminds a lot of people of an ex-cop more than an ex-CIA guy.
Yeah.
Very like, hey, how's it going? Super friendly. But he did protective work too. Same thing with Bobby, a lot on the director side. So with you working on Bush's detail as SWAT, what does that mean exactly?
So we're there for the worst case scenario. So if somebody actually does an attack on the compound or against the president of the United States, we were the aggressors going in and neutralizing. So I actually had a SWAT canine dog, an apprehension dog. And so part of it was when we deployed out was to take down the assailant. So first and foremost, if we could take down an assailant without having to shoot them, we would launch a dog. So I was canine handler with that. But at any time, we had guns to neutralize the assailant, depending on what we see. If we see a weapon and he raises a weapon, or if we see elements on him that looks like a bomb, we're going to do and neutralize the threat from a distance. And that goes in conjunction with other units such as counter snipers that are placed in different areas. So with us being on the ground, approaching overhead security from the counter snipers, identifying any potential threat on the person or additional threats, our job was to apprehend first and foremost. And if we couldn't apprehend, then we have to neutralize.
Well, did you have to ever neutralize somebody?
No, not in Secret Service. So Secret Service is 100% law enforcement. So you still use complete use of force continuum. So you have to go up and down that. So you have to get to a point where if you're going to use use of force, lethal force, you have to go through the process to identify why, and then be able down the road articulate why you use that lethal force. That's why we had different layers. That's why the dog was a fantastic tool that we had to be able to launch out from a distance and deal with the subject. But just like any law enforcement agency, you have to go through the process, all the tools that you have. And if you tried everything and this person has raised the aggression or raised the use of force against you, then you have to use appropriate means.
So, and now I want to touch. So, okay. So, number one, did you ever get to meet Bush? I always ask people that do protective detail. Did you ever get to meet his family, or did you get to meet Bush?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, he called us his Black Rangers. We wore all black, so he will always come out and say, "Where's my Black Rangers at?" He used to come out on the South Grounds. We'll be there every time he stepped out in the open. We'll have to push out, and he'll see us moving around. We do get to meet him at times when he wants. We're all able to take a picture as a group with him. but you don't have a relationship that is a friendship. The president approaches you and talks to you, then you talk to the president. But other than that, the president's moving, you move in a direction to where you could probably cover him. So at no time should you be right next to him unless he goes to you and asks you to speak with him. Other than that, you keep what's called a bubble. The bubbles creates this 360 and with the protecting in the center. So as he comes out anywhere, we create that bubble. So there shouldn't be a time where you have any of your protectees unless it's what we call the body man, the person right next to the president that will have to remove him from a danger or shield him. Everyone else should be in a situation where they're far enough to engage in any threats, identify threats, engage in any threats, and become that buffer in between.
So with protecting the president, and because again, the like the most recent guys I've done interviews with that have done protective work, it's usually on the directors, right?
Yeah.
So between both of the Bobs, actually it's funny because I made a joke about this. The other Secret Service guy I had on that did work for Bill Clinton, his name was Robert. So it's another Bob.
Yeah.
So it's 3 Bobs doing protective work. So Ninja, when I spoke to him, I asked him about the setup of protecting a director, right? And how that works. And I asked him about how do you protect someone like that as compared to the president, right? Because when you're protecting the president, everybody thinks of guy, earpiece, billion counter snipers everywhere, and white van, motorcade, police cars traveling with him, whatever. But my question then would be, how does it look when you're there? Is it really that crowded all the time when the president needs protection? Like, let's just say George Bush, he loved to jog, for example, right? He loved to go for morning runs. So how did that look, setting something like that up?
So there's if they are a sitting president at the time, they're going to get the full detail that's on them, and that is exactly what you see. You're going to have different layers from the inner layer, middle, and outer layer, and that's going to be constant on the current president. And what it does is it provides time and distance to identify threats from far away and be able to deal with that and be able to move the president out of the area. So there's a lot sitting there. And you're talking exactly what you said, multiple cars on motorcades to multiple support units, from law enforcement that will be on most outer rings, will be the law enforcement from the city. Now, when you start moving into, say, a director size or things like that, and that even goes into even smaller when you start protecting, high value targets such as or individuals such as major CEOs. You could talk about like a Zuckerman or anyone like that. It gets smaller because the threat towards that isn't as great. It is, for that person, it could be great, but that's how we look at it. The president of the United States is the biggest target, and the vice president too. So when you look at someone like a director, they're going to have a smaller signature. They're not going to have, 15 cars with them, unless you're going to a very specific area that the threat level is raised and they have to add things to it. But on a normal basis, you'll probably run with, 2-3 cars, and that's it. You want to get the whole tail car or anything like that from the local PD. Now, some details, they do add a tactical team to it. The president of the United States has a tactical team. Some of these details will add a tactical team just in case they go into an area that is of a higher threat, or the threat level has raised because of what's happening in the world and on social media somewhere. There was a threat towards the director of, say, the FBI, a direct threat. Then they'll actually increase the security, adding possibly a tactical team. But for the most part, they try to keep things as low key as possible. When you run with a 15-car motorcade, everyone sees that you're coming. Even when you run with 2 black Suburbans, you're someone special. If you start moving into more of the civilian side, where I do a lot of work and advising with high value individuals, I tend to tell them, we don't need a signature like that, and we stay more low key. So security is all dependent upon two things: one, the level of threat that's against the person, and then two, not getting any more threat by your profile, not increasing your visibility. And that's a talk between how you can do it, thinking outside the box, but also talk with the protectee and say, okay, this is how we can secure you. And I've done many ways. The best ways I do it is in the civilian sector. It's very low profile, where nobody really knows that we're coming, and nobody can really tell that that person is who he is.
So when you get a guy like you said, like Mark Zuckerberg, right? You said Zuckerman, but Zuckerberg.
Yes, Zuckerberg. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Or Elon Musk, right?
Yeah.
Now, Elon Musk cannot walk down anywhere really without being bombarded, I would say, by a million reporters, journalists, probably a crowd of people, and being like, hey, is that Elon Musk? Is that Elon Musk? Right?
Yeah.
Because I could imagine in my head, right? Just either I'm going to name like the most famous people in the world, like Ronaldo, or Elon Musk, right? I'm going to mainly focus on the billionaires. Let's say Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg walks down the street. He's going to get swarmed by people like, hey, what, like, why'd you do this? Hey, can we get a photo? Whatever. So when you're talking about protecting a high net worth individual, right, as you're saying, do you have personal experience with doing that? And like, is this after the Secret Service or?
This is after Secret Service and after the CIA. So I left the CIA in 2018, and I've been in the private sector since then. So yes, you could get away with a lot of things. It's a method of how you travel. One, if I have two black Suburbans come up into an area, say a shopping mall, right? People on the outside are going to see two black Suburbans. They're going to look. It's going to attract attention. Okay. If we come into one vehicle and say it's just a regular sedan, and we get dropped off and walk in, people are not going to really look at that sedan. And one person may catch, wait a minute, that looked like Elon Musk walking by, right? But it's not going to attract the media attention. Like if I have two black Suburbans coming in, guys pop out with suits and earpieces and everything, and it's all tinted out, people are going to look. They're going to look right away. It's a tendency that equals in people's minds someone important. If I come in with a white Mercedes and I'm wearing not a suit and just regular, just business casual, polo shirt and slacks, and I pop out, open the door for him, he comes out, we walk together, people are less likely to pay attention to that. There's also other things you do. I'll probably have a Vance out there. My Vance agent is going to tell me where to go drop off at. If I decide to drop off in the middle of a lot of people, I'm going to attract a lot of attention. If we go more discreet and drop off in an area that doesn't have a lot of people and maybe walk around the back, that's a lot better for us. So there's ways of doing it. It's all your setup. There's a lot of people in the civilian sector that want to roll around like the Secret Service. They like the cool guy stuff, put the earpiece in, walk around with the sunglasses on, looking like Men in Black. And it's an ego thing. You're not doing anything for the protectee. What you're doing is looking cool. You're doing a cool guy look for yourself because you like to look like the Secret Service. Myself, I don't do that. I'll blend in just like anyone else. I think I had one person I was watching over, and he dressed pretty much like a skinny jeans, boy band guy. And guess what? I wore things similar to him, not necessarily skinny jeans, but I was in jeans and t-shirt, just like him. What you want to look like is something natural, like two friends walking into a store. If my protectee is dressed in a suit, then I'll be in a suit. If my protectee is dressed in casual clothes, then I'm switching to casual clothes. And the way we walk is going to be similar to that. I may get the door only because I'll get the door from my friends the same way, but it's your demeanor and how you look. A lot of guys will like to project the tough guy look the whole time. Well, that catches attention to a lot of people. So for myself, I'll just blend in, no tough guy look, just walking through. I'm not pushing people out of the way. We're walking just like if we're walking the mall. We're just walking along. That is the problem that a lot of people that move into protection, especially when they move from, or if they don't have any formal training, such as the Secret Service or the protective groups in the State Department, FBI, or CIA, what they tend to do is project authority out to everyone, which causes more people to look, which causes the chance of you getting into a situation versus if you would just act normal, you will never be in the same situation. I can tell you, I've walked people in many situations that are well known that nobody knew were there. Until we got to the store and started the person shopping, and the person that's helping them recognize who the person is. Other than that, most people walk around with blinders on. It's things that trigger them to look at you and then take notice of what is going on.
So, if I might ask, right, and you don't have to give me specifics, but in terms of the most famous people that you've had to protect, right, because you're saying, well, no. So, and again, you don't have to say the person's name if you don't want to, which I'm assuming you don't, but
so it's quite fine.
What?
So the most important, most visible person and in the area, which the person isn't like, was Congressman Jim Jordan in New York City, walking New York City with me and him. Now, New York City is a very liberal city. Jim Jordan is a very not liked by the very much liberal people. He's not very much liked. He's a high-ranking Republican congressman. And so, walking down New York City, you can run to anybody down there. I mean, you can see what's happening, right now with the riots and different things going on. And this was not many years back when he was also at the height of his profile. And it was during the Benghazi trials when he was really hounding Hillary Clinton and everybody with the Benghazi trial. So you can imagine, going down New York City in the height of all that. And it's me and him, and he's well known, recognizable. But we did the same thing, just walked. We actually walked and had breakfast in a local shop, just me and him. So you could get away with a lot of things because people don't notice. And, that is a high profile person in a city that he's very liberal, walking into Fox News to do an interview where you have people protesting. Liberals are all outside Fox News because they get irritated with Fox News. So you can see how, you'll think, okay, we need to make sure everything's good, protection, everything. No, we just kept it very low, just walked in, did our thing, walked right out and bothered nobody.
Well, it's funny because New York City it's like New York City, LA, like all the big cities have a lot of celebrities in them. So my uncle, he lives in New York City, and I was talking about just like the people he sees. And the one name that stuck with me was when he saw Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Right. Just walking down the street. And it's a funny feeling. But also, too, I want to ask about Jim Jordan. Did you, when you're having breakfast with him, were you talking to him? Like, can you have that type of relationship where you're like, hey, like, how's everything? Like, I pick his brain a little bit.
Yeah, with that relationship with him, yes, at the time I had a talking relationship. We've hit it off really well. We blended together really well. And so in that situation, we're having breakfast together and we're talking about different things. So it changes from protectee to protectee, and it changes based upon what we're doing. Obviously, if it's just going to be me and him and this is the way it is, we have to seem as if we could talk to each other. A lot of people thought I was just his aide, and they were handing me notes like, can you give this to to Congressman Jordan? They didn't think I was security at all. They thought I was his aide because that's how I projected myself.
So now I want to go into more detail about, your work at, okay, first of all, what you're doing now is private intelligence or just private security?
So so I facilitate a lot of things. So I have a lot of clients that come to me that have various issues that happen to them, whether they need some level of protection, they need someone to oversee what they're doing in their company. If they have a due diligence need to be done as far as double checking who they're doing business with, things like that. And to a point, if somebody has people they know that are stuck in war zones or in bad situations, so it goes from the gamut from one end to the other. So what I'd mainly do is, if you want to encapsulate it into one thing, I have a lot of clients that have very unique situations that are kind of more out of the box. And they come to me to solve these issues. So say they have security already with them, but there's a lack of trust for having security. I will come in and do a undercover check on a lot of different things, whether it's security for themselves physically, and I'll do tests, or to go through the whole system to see if anybody is doing nefarious things. So it all depends on how I blend in. Other aspects is dealing with the human trafficking. I've done a lot of things against human traffickers where I'll go in and undercover, just gather intel in foreign countries, and to provide that information to whoever asked me to go, whatever nonprofit requests my services, and then they pass that information to local law enforcement to go ahead and intervene. So it goes from everywhere, from that to extractions. If someone's caught, I did a rescue in Ukraine 3 days after the war broke out. That was featured in People magazine. So there's a lot, and soon I'll be heading over and doing another documentary in Thailand and Burma about the human trafficking. So it's very unique at situations, but situations that require people that have very unique skills.
So you mentioned Ukraine, and you also mentioned Benghazi, right? Now, there's a person I've had on the show, Sarah Adams. Do you know who she is?
Sarah Adams.
She was the head of the Benghazi investigation.
Okay. Yeah.
She worked. You know what I'm talking about now?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's doing work in Ukraine now. And I spoke to her about, because she does humanitarian work. So, because I guess the nonprofit is not allowed to get involved in anything other than humanitarian work. And one of the things that she mentioned was the fact that the Russian government has very often, by accident, or rather intentionally, I should just say, killed humanitarian workers from her nonprofit in Ukraine, right? Just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Now, when you did the extraction in Ukraine, what's the story? Was this like a special case? Was this like a family in need, like last resort sort of thing?
So it was more last resort. So it really came down to with the company I was working with, as I was the director of security. We worked in various campaigns and areas, events, different things like that, high profile situations. They had a person working at one of these events that was very distraught. And it found out that, my team found out that his son was stuck in Ukraine. And this was, it was at the breakout. Russia hasn't invaded yet. And, but the threat was there. And he was worried. to get his kid out. His ex-wife is Ukrainian, and she works for U.S. aid. And so they were trying to find a way to get him out, and nothing was working. It was complete chaos. And at the same time, Ukraine is drafting every single person that's military age to come right in and join the military. So you're talking like Uber drivers, shopkeepers, never picked up a gun. They're getting them loaded out for a possible invasion from Russia. So what we try to do, because the company I was with didn't specialize in anything like this, we're merely a guard company, and we reached out to companies that specialize in this, major companies that specialize in situations where it requires evacuations. No company was willing to do this at the time. It was too much going on, too dangerous to go on in there. I made contact with people that I knew from the agency and asked them, is there any resources out there to help this kid out? At the time, they got back to me and said, every single kid or every single person they have in Ukraine has been relocated to either Poland or Romania. There's nobody there anymore. Okay, so and at this time, when I started inquiring some more with the people I knew at the agency, just for gathering some information of what's out there, what's happening, and very unclassified stuff. Russia's already invaded. It's already done. And so it got to a dire strait. And we tapped out all the possible resources to get this kid out with companies that could be able to do it. And our company wasn't equipped for this at all. And then it fell on my lap, and I said, okay, listen, if this needs to happen, then I'll go ahead and get the kid out. And at the time, like I said, no resources, no nothing, how are you going to do this? But something just felt like I had to do it, especially when I talked to the father. And he was willing to go with me. He has no military experience. But it reminded me of myself. If it was my kids stuck out there, what would I do? And at this moment in time, I had to make a choice, whether I take all the skills I've gained through military, Secret Service, and the CIA and do what I can to try to help this kid out, or turn my back like everyone else did. So it wasn't a choice. So made my way over there. It was a Sunday. Made my way over there. I was just looking at my passport today. I saw when I crossed over. I crossed over on March 1st. And I pulled the kid out, made my way up to Ukraine, through Ukraine up to the kid in Kiev, and got him out and crossed the border March 3rd. Did not know the language, built my resources through Facebook groups, getting people to interpret for me, give me intel on the ground, and also, going from city to city, making my way all the way up, and then reversing that. And there's a lot more to it, more detail. There is a book coming out on it, and a documentary on the whole excursion. So it'll be very good to see. It's really dealt with a lot of my faith. I dealt with a lot in my life, and I said this to a lot of people. I've never felt safer than doing this. And this, I had zero resources, no U.S. government, no one was coming for me.
So ultimately, the boy is okay.
The boy's okay.
Okay, that's a happy ending.
Yeah, the boy's okay.
Yep, that's what I wanted to hear, because I'm like building this up. So So when you were in Ukraine, right? This is now going to be the question of like, when you're in Ukraine, in the middle of a war, right? And your former U.S. intelligence, and you had just gotten off U.S. intelligence, and you used to be in the military, and you used to do protection work for the president, right? And the enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing. So Russia, who is the enemy of the United States, is also the enemy of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right? So was part of your concern at all that Russia would identify you?
I will tell you this. No, there was a lot going on, chaos. And there's a lot of things that you could do in the midst of chaos if you just play it cool and just go. The Russians, the Ukrainians, obviously I had my passports. I had to get stamped. The Ukrainians knew, but there's too much going on to actually do a check of my name or anything like that. More or less, Russia, the deal with Russia would be me getting caught up in the middle of gunfights between the Ukrainian and Russians, or dealing with separatists that are trying to kill people, period. Or what happened was another thing that actually happened was the Ukrainians in these cities that stayed. People were staying in these cities to defend their cities. I was a foreigner coming through, so they didn't know what I was. So they were aggressive against me. So it's a matter of navigating all these fears, generalized fears, and not knowing, okay, you looking at you and saying you fit the profile of what we're afraid may be coming in, like a mercenary paid by the Russians to come on in, to cause havoc in these cities. I mean, we had a lot of Russian separatists that was all over, that wasn't part of the regular army, that was just going around doing damage. And the Russians don't, unlike the United States, the Russians aren't discriminate against their shooting, against what they do. So they're more than happy to launch rockets into a city with civilians, where the United States will be very careful and will actually put our troops in harm's way versus the possibility of any civilian casualties. So when she said, the Russians were killing humanitarian people, they were targeting the areas that they wanted to target, regardless if you were there or not. In their mind, you should not be there. It's a war. You should not be there. So if you're a civilian in the city and it's a war and they're invading, then you are you're going to be a casualty. They're not going to discriminate against it.
Well, my main concern would be, in your position, because I was talking to a guy. I'm not going to say his name, but I said to him something about going to Russia. I'm like, you could do it in person. Like, you don't have to, like, you just go to Russia and do it. And I don't want to say the guy's name or anything what he does. But he's like, no, I literally can't go to Russia. And I'm like,
Yeah.
What do you mean? And he's like, I can't go to Russia because, and he named, because if I said the reason, it would kind of give away who it is.
Yeah.
But he basically said that he could not go to Russia because he had done certain things in the United States that the Russian government would not be happy about.
Yeah.
Right. So his concern was that if he were to do this thing in Russia, right, then he would likely be rolled up, as Bobby would say.
Yeah. And that's very much true, because you're coming into a control area where they're actually checking your IDs and everything, and it'll be flagged. You're already flagged in the system. It's the same thing where recently I was in Pakistan. And, Pakistan, I've operated in Pakistan with the CIA. So when I got there, I knew I'm going to get looked at. They're not going to stop. They're not going to roll me up, but they're going to follow me around. And exactly what it was. We had, ISI, which is their intelligence service, following me around. They were in the lobby of the hotel. It's perfectly fine because I was not doing anything nefarious. But, when you go into their homeland and you're submitting paperwork to enter, you're going to get flagged. There's no way. You got to expect it. So when he says, if I go into Russia, I have to submit, a visa. That means I got to submit my passport. That means they have all my information. You're going to get flagged. They're going to be waiting for you when you come in. They know the flight you're coming in. They know when you're coming in. They know everything. They know where you're staying at. So they're going to be following you around. Myself and Ninja had to do some stuff during the Arab Spring in Egypt. We knew right away, right in our hotel. The Egyptian intelligence service was sitting in the lobby watching us everywhere we went. They watched us. We were there for 2 weeks, doing a evaluation of the situation on the ground during Arab Spring in Cairo. It's a natural thing. You could play it two ways. You could be aggressive with them, try to lose them, and then they're going to step it up, or they start messing with you, or they end up rolling you up. So I try to see, okay, why are you trying to loot us? Or you just let it be. Let them do their job, and you do your job and just be boring as heck. So he's completely right. Once you enter a foreign country and you've done things, and you're gonna get that second look at. Now Russia, yeah, they'll pull you in secondary. Same thing with China. If I enter China, they'll probably pull me in secondary also.
Well, China's surveillance is like top notch. The same thing with Russia too.
Yeah.
Both of their surveillance is like best of the world. So if you, it would just be a funny circumstance, I think, for them, because they would kind of look at your passport and they would immediately say, oh, this guy, and they would look it up because surveillance cameras everywhere in China, and they would immediately say, hey, this guy used to work for U.S. intelligence.
Yep.
And that would immediately raise some red flags. So, then you'd be into like 6-hour questioning or more. Or going to a prison camp for the rest of your life.
Well, they wouldn't, unless you're doing something nefarious against them, or they've been looking for you. Those are two different things. But if you're coming into, say, China, knowing my background and what I've done, I have to strongly consider that they know once I put my visa in and they have all of my information, my room is going to be bugged. It's going to happen. It's how it is. I'm going to get followed. There's going to be intelligence at the bars, at the restaurants. There's going to be intelligence in the bottom of the hotel in the lobby. They may put intelligence officers, part of the hotel staff. So you can't discount anything like that, And the thing is, you're working in their, whatever you're doing, you're in their country. So if you do anything that is, say, aggressive, or makes them feel like you're doing something nefarious or something they want to find out, like trying to ditch their surveillance. There's surveillance with you, you try to ditch them, or you play games with them. It's their land. They got more people. They'll just put more people on you. They'll just make it harder for you to do anything. And so, it's knowing it and living with it, but also understanding what is a true threat and wasn't a true threat. I know if I go to China, there's not a threat of them trying to kill me. They just want to know what the heck's going on. Same thing if a Chinese intelligence officer ends up at our border to enter on a plane, and we have their visa, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're not going to kill the person, but we're going to make sure that person has surveillance. We're watching every step of what they do. Now, that's different if you go to a country, say, as Pakistan. Pakistan is still an ally of us, but it's known that Pakistan does have sympathizers with, Islamic terrorists. So that still feels safe, but you got to be, looking behind your back on certain things because there's a terrorist element sitting there. Now, if I went to Lebanon is a state-sponsored state, and it's pretty much controlled by Hezbollah, which is a terrorist network. I got to look at, if I go over there, there's a bigger chance of something happening to me that is not, getting kicked out of the country or getting rolled up for 6 hours, getting interrogated. Something else may happen to me, depending on the climate that's happening in the world. So it all depends on where you're going. It changes. So my mentality of what I do and how I proceed in certain countries is really dependent upon who's in charge, truly in charge of that country. Because everyone look at Lebanon and they'll be like, well, Lebanon is a free, country. No, it's really controlled by Hezbollah. everything that's, Hezbollah has become politicians or Hezbollah members. So yeah, they're a democracy, so to speak, where they have elected officials, but those elected officials are terrorists. And they're card carrying terrorists.
So, if, for example, and this is like a question I've thought about, which is if I were to go to Russia,
Mhm.
or if I were to go to Ukraine, considering that my podcast is mainly with people that are U.S. intelligence related, Secret Service related, FBI, people that have known the directors,
Yeah.
as U.S. intelligence as you can get in some cases, right? Would I be pulled into secondary if I was to go to Russia?
Possibly so. It depends on how in tune they're looking into the United States at the time. You could go real fast, ask you what you're doing. Considering that your platform is more in the media area, depending on they're going to want to know what you're doing here as far as media. I mean, they took a reporter and put him in jail. So media has a real weird situation. And, you're considered media now because there's a lot of freelance media for people all around the United States. With technology the way it is, being able to do podcasts, being able to stream it from anywhere, they're going to look at what is being told outside of our control. These are communist countries. So if you go there, I say more with your media background, you're going to get scrutinized. You're going to get followed. And if you do anything that seems like you're getting information that is not what you should be getting, then they could label you as a spy and then put you in jail, and then tie in the fact that you on your media you have a lot of connections with intelligence officers, even though they're former intelligence officers, they just count as intelligence officers. That will put you in a predicament.
So one of the individuals that I've had on the show, Bill Holstein, is the guy's name, and he's a journalist, and for the past 40 or so years, he has been covering China.
Yeah.
Right. Just everything about how they have infiltrated U.S. security and various aspects of the United States government. And he's written multiple books about it. He lived in China for many years. So, and he co-authored the book with the head of cyber counterintelligence at the Pentagon. I'm trying to think who else. He authored it with multiple different people, and I asked him about his sources of like information, right? But one thing I asked him, I'm like, do you think you're being spied on? Right. Considering that you're being heavily critical of a government that hates people who are critical of it, right? You are being as critical as you could possibly be. You are exposing, right, various operations by saying, well, they're doing this, they're buying this to do this to U.S. intelligence, right? And you're going into very extreme detail. So I'm like, do you think you're being spied on? He's like, yeah, I do. He's like, I've never noticed anything like guy in a van. But he did say he had a friend who did in Washington, who it was like basically a guy who's doing the same thing. It was like 4 Asian men in a van, and like every which corner he turned, no matter where it was, they were there, like just constantly throughout that entire day. And he's like no matter where he went, just and this was in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
So just everywhere he went. So number one, do you think that the guy I interviewed is being surveilled by the Chinese government? And secondly, do you think that guy they told me a story about that was his friend that's doing the same thing was also being surveilled?
Yeah, I believe so. So through association, they're going to want to watch what you're doing to get information on you. And especially as he's been outspoken and wrote about communist regime, 100%. Communism in any form, socialism, communism, wants to suppress. They want to suppress realities of what's happening. It doesn't serve them any purpose. Communism wants to spread themselves across the globe, and so how do you suppress or how do you spread yourself? You got to show all the wonderful parts of communism, which everyone gets everything, and not the negative parts of it. So it's 100% that he was completely surveillance.
So now if, you get, because again, I've had so many different people on the show, so it's kind of hard to keep track, but when it comes to your experience in counterintelligence, right, and being able to spot like, okay, this guy doesn't seem that trustworthy, this guy is conducting a surveillance operation. Were there ever circumstances where you would see a spy from either Russia or China, and how did you pick these guys out, I guess? Like what made them different from you or me?
So you look at different profiles of people. First off, before we post, it's really stereotyping. Looking for all the minor things that will just pick out certain people, and people that have certain, asking certain questions, doing certain things that's out of the norm. But then you still have to verify. So there's stuff what we call operations tests. An operations test is something simple as, throwing something out there just to see if there's a bite on it. And it could be benign, it could be something. You're doing that coupled with, checks, background checks if you need to go that further into it. Surveillance is another thing, kind of see where they're going. Does it make sense? But if you have a good intelligence officer, that good intelligence officer is not going to give you, his what he's doing day in and day out is going to make sense. It's going to seem natural. So that's where, if there's still something sitting there that's not sitting well with you, that's where you do a little test. You throw something out there that is not in your face, but subtle. And something that if he was doing something nefarious against the country, spying against the country, he will pick up on this. Some way, somehow, he will use as an opportunity. And so that's a way to verify certain things. And that's a lot of times what we had to do. We had to verify what was going on. And so you'll design. You can design anything that comes in your head. You're not limited. There's not a script that's given to you. So you got to do this, this, and this. No. What all it is you got to figure out the best way to show that this person is or is not doing what you suspect them of doing. And then you build a case off of that. If you get that and it's a hit, okay, now you go the next level where I'm tossing more surveillance. I'm running more checks. I'm actually doing electronic surveillance on the person. Get more invasive with that person. But, like I said, an ops test could be something very simple, dropping, a hint of somebody that he really should be meeting with, targeting, that they're going to be in this area. And then all of a sudden that person shows up over there. It's just very subtle things.
So now, with regards to the electronic surveillance, because I love to touch on this topic every time I can. Now I had on a guy by the name of Jack Rysider, who runs podcast Darknet Diaries. All right. Mm-hmm. And this guy interviews hackers from literally everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So his whole podcast is just interviewing hackers, right? And they're typically hackers that have not been caught, right? They've done their thing, and sometimes they have been caught, sometimes they have not been caught. It's just any type of hacker, usually way after the hack has been done, so that he can figure out, he's like, okay, how did you do it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how did you commit this crime? And as you can imagine, that gets certain people's attention, right?
Yeah.
Mainly that of the FBI. So when I asked him, I'm like, okay, so has the FBI or have you ever been contacted by the government? And he's like, yeah, but not the way you think. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, they usually will come to me and they will usually message me on Discord or any messaging platform, and they will say, hey, we know you just did an interview with this guy, or we saw this episode. Is there any way you could put us in contact with this individual to know how he, for example, how he hacks pedophiles, for example?
Yeah.
That was one.
Yeah.
And he's like, they want to know, the FBI wants to know more about pedophiles. So why take, and this guy is also, it's funny because this guy has, I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. He had 5 NSA agents on his show, right? And he got that approved by the director of the NSA.
Yeah.
But my point was with someone like him, when I asked him, like, do you think you've been spied on? Now, I'm not going to say his answer, but what do you think?
Well, I would say there's interest in listening in, kind of following and seeing what's going on. There's going to be a check, a due diligence check. So I wouldn't say it's a necessary would be a complete operations check that I would do. It would be due diligence. Okay, is this guy legit? What he's doing, or is he gaining information? Because you're getting access of hackers. Are you utilizing that for your own nefarious activities? And so, yeah, would I do a due diligence check on a person? Yeah, completely. He's gathering information that from people that are successful hacking at the highest levels sometimes. So, yeah, it'll be a due diligence check. But, I'm not going to wouldn't do the cloak and dagger stuff, people hiding in bushes or anything like that. I wouldn't do a surveillance check of capturing every single thing. Now, if we do a due diligence check and something's off, that will trigger the next level. Because you got to understand that there's resources and money that has to go into this. If I pull a team to go do this, they can't do other things. And so I have to justify the cost for this, the resources that are going into this. Because even if, we say it's government, there's resources all the time, but you still have to justify it because there is a line item on your budget, an expense, and you have to say, okay, this is what it's for, and you have to build that case. If not, why are you pursuing this? So, a due diligence can trigger something, and a due diligence could be something very simple, going through and do a quick scrub of his activity and just leave it at that and open source stuff. But that's as far as me with counterintelligence, that's where I'll leave it. Due diligence. If something's flagged, then take it to the next level. If nothing's flagged, everything seems normal, and it fits with what he's doing. He's doing just interviewing people. Then he's done nothing illegal.
Right. Well, so his answer to my question was, it was really vague. It wasn't like a yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
It was like more of like a maybe, but why? Right? Like, okay, yeah, they might have, but like, what reason would they really have to do it? I'm not doing anything illegal, sort of thing. But more importantly, that he also had journalistic freedoms, right? Where, he has the right to his sources and his contacts. He doesn't have to reveal them. He's not doing anything legal. He's not participating in the crime.
Yeah.
And it's different. But Andrew Bustamante, I'm sure you're familiar with him,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he's a friend of a friend. I've never spoken to the guy. The one time I did message him, he left me unread. And what's it called? With him, when he was on Lex Friedman's show, he made a comment to Lex about Lex being surveilled. And he's like, you are definite. And he basically said to Lex, he's like, you're definitely of interest to intelligence. And he's like, and Lex was kind of like taken aback, like anybody would be. And he's like, yeah, but why? And Andrew Bustamante's response was that it's not you, it's the fact that you are interviewing X people, like all these different people from
Yeah.
such a wide variety. You know, like he interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Like
Yeah.
that's definitely going to set some flags for different countries. So he's like, yeah, you definitely have like a dossier. You definitely have all this. Now, I don't know if Andrew Bustamante is trying to make it sound really sexy. Like, you know, you have this whole dossier on you, et cetera, et cetera. But what are your thoughts on that statement?
So it all depends. You know, I wouldn't say there'll be a complete dossier. I think there'll be, you know, there would interest, there'll be something there to just flag that this person is engaging in this type of stuff. You know, especially as a journalist has access to a lot of different things, and they go down different stories. You know, um, but you also have to look on the flip side. That's why I say a due diligence. I wouldn't say there's a complete dossier of every single person or anything like that, but there's probably a due diligence done just to make sure, you know, everything was good. You know, the big question why everything's checking out. You know, I can tell you this: the government has a lot going on that it's something really has to flag to start building huge cases. If not, I mean, let's just in the United States, there's 300 million people in the United States. The FBI does not have the time to go for every little thing that pops up. Now, if something is flagged and it's out of the ordinary, then they're going to take more attention towards that. It's the same thing with the agency. There's so many people out there, you know. There's a lot that people do that's weird. I'll tell you, you'll be amazed at what people do if you start noticing in their normal life. That if you're not really studying people and how they act, you will catch something. You'll see someone doing something like, oh, that's a spy. That's a spy right there. Look what they're doing. The reality is people do weird stuff all the time. I was just having a conversation with somebody last month about people following them around in this area. And they were like, yeah, we're being followed, And I said, not necessarily, There could be numerous things. Nobody's really going after you because of what? That's the big thing. Why? Why are they going after you? In this particular area in Northern Virginia, you have a lot of intelligence, military, organizations, right? And they have to practice at times. They have to do certain things. So sometimes they may just decide, hey, I'm going to practice on my, train my skills, and I'm just going to loose follow somebody. Why means nothing. Why it's benign. You may think that's kind of weird, but you got to look at the environment that you're in. You have law enforcement practices at different times. You may see somebody doing something that seems like surveillance. It could very well be a training exercise. Law enforcement. We're in the nation's capital. You're gonna have law enforcement practicing doing these things. What do you think? How do you practice? The best way to practice is in the actual environment, because you have instructors watching them, seeing if they're acting natural in that environment. You can't do it in a training. There's not a training space big enough to mimic a whole city. When you're going to take these skills into the city to actually go and say surveil terrorists. So you have to work in these environments. So you may see things like that is weird, but in reality it could be easily explained off. Second to that, when this other lady was telling me, well, this car came in, made a couple U-turns and came out. Yeah, I said, well, why don't you just practice watching people? And you see people are bad drivers. They don't know directions. They get lost in the neighborhoods. People do weird things. And so you could discount a lot of those things as anomalies, but in our tradecraft, we're taught certain ways to be able to extract that out. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, during the extraction of all that data points, if it doesn't equal that, if something's off, then it's just what we call a ghost or an anomaly. It just happens. And, really being part of it and understanding it and really studying things like that, you notice that people do a lot of weird stuff. And so what you may think is surveillance on you could reality be just coincidence that somebody's walking down that same place, or just coincidence that you may have jumped into a middle of a law enforcement training exercise that they're doing out in the streets and live, just where they're just following people. You got to train somehow. It's easy. If I was running a law enforcement team right now, and I was running a surveillance unit in, say, where I live in Fairfax County, I don't have the resources or the manpower to be able to get role players all over here. So what I'll do is I'll have you follow people from a distance, because your job as surveillance not to get caught. Correct? Get the information, not get caught. Do it discreet. So what's the best way to do it? Right out here in the city.
So I want to, and I have like 2 more questions.
Yeah, no worries.
Or 2 or 3. I have like a couple more questions. But so I was talking, I've never really gone deep into this subject because I feel like it's like the most conspiratorial thing I could possibly ask.
Mhm.
But Jeffrey Epstein. So a lot of people have come up with this theory that Jeffrey Epstein worked for intelligence. Now, whether that was Mossad or U.S. intelligence, people don't really know. Now, people come up with this theory because, well, number one, the judge, and I think one of his original cases was literally told, hey, yeah, he works for intelligence, back off. Don't interfere with the case. And, every time he would get arrested, it would kind of seem like things would just fizzle away.
Yep.
Right. Now, to be fair, he had a lot of money, so that's also a very big part of it. But, and there's a few other things too. Now, I have my own opinions on it, but as somebody that worked in counterintelligence, I don't know how familiar you are with the Jeffrey Epstein case, but do you think that he worked for intelligence gathering of another country?
No, he didn't. What he did was he was a complete pervert, nasty pervert that provided services to high-profile people. And we see it. It's nothing more than human trafficking, sex trafficking. And you're seeing it right now. Look at what happened to P. Diddy. All the disgusting things are coming out. We live in a very disgusting society. And in this disgusting society, we have people with high power, high profile that engage in this kind of stuff. And so when you have the secrets to everybody, if you're carrying no secrets, you have that level of protection until you become too much of a liability. And so if Jeffrey Epstein is sitting there in court cases and people are like, yo, he's this, that, and whatnot, you got to look where the source is coming from. Now, my honest opinion, Jeffrey Epstein had information on a lot of high-powered people, things that they don't want to go public, which in one essence keeps him powerful, but at another essence, if possible, a liability that needs to be cut ties with to bury those secrets. So that's the situation we're in. That's my honest opinion about it. I don't see anything from intelligence on there. I see everything about power politics sitting within that. A lot of people's reputation. We just had that over here in Fairfax County. Fairfax County, a lot of high-powered people were caught on the name of a sex shop with sex trafficking done right here in not too far where I live. The saddest thing about our society, which is one of the reasons why I'll be going to Thailand and Burma to fight against the human trafficking, this is reality. This is the actual elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about: human trafficking. And what you get from human trafficking, you get sex trafficking, you get forced labor, you get organ harvesting, which no one even talks about. They pull kids out, they pick them from these areas of civil unrest, and they shoot them in the head to harvest, their livers and kidneys. That is probably it's the second biggest crime next to drugs worldwide. Human trafficking is a $300 billion industry, $70 billion industry right here in the United States. And that's why I'm proud to say that in the civilian sector, I'm gearing dedicating my life towards combating human trafficking. Just the elements of it is disgusting, and the problem with that is the powerful are part of it too. And so Jeffrey Epstein, going back to that, he had a lot of information that could damage a lot of people.
So part of the theory with the counterintelligence side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the reason people think he was intelligence, right? And I go back and forth with, like, because I don't try to think about it too much, but it's like such an outlier of a case, that it's kind of hard not to look at it. And I watched the full documentary too on Netflix, which is really good. Yeah. But with him, and this is something I heard on Joe Rogan, which is generally trustworthy, but he apparently, the first apartment he received was a $17 million apartment in New York that was bought for him, right? Mm-hmm. And every step of the way, something strange happened. So judge gets told, right? A judge literally gets told, hey, he's part of U.S. intelligence. This is a U.S. intelligence operation. Don't get involved, right? Number one. Number two, he had connections with intelligence too. So Ghislaine Maxwell, her dad was one of the greatest spies in all of Mossad, right? He was famous, one of the most famous spies in Mossad history, which is like the second biggest intelligence agency in the world. And so just one thing after the other, right? And he met, because how he made his money originally, most people don't know this, is through a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. His name is Stephen Hoffenberg was the guy's name, I think. They made this over 9-figure Ponzi scheme with the ultra wealthy, and nothing happened to Jeffrey Epstein, but something did happen to this guy, right? The guy got arrested and he had to pay like $500 million, but why not Epstein, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they met through a British defense contractor. I forget the guy's name, but he did have an affiliation with British intelligence as well, because since he's a defense contractor, he does have affiliation with intelligence, and I think he did work for them for a while. So, he has all these various vague connections to intelligence, and he, it's always, he meets with a guy, he does a thing, and he gains a lot from it, and then he kind of just moves on, and something happens to the person, and he kind of just goes away. Like, he goes and does his own thing. So a lot of people point to and again, his own girlfriend, or whatever she was to him, Ghislaine Maxwell, her dad, super famous spy, right? And on top of that, the guy also, and one more thing I want to add on, which is he would fly with, Bill Clinton while he was in the White House. Now, I don't want to get into the Clinton conspiracy theory, because that's like such a deep rabbit hole that, I don't know if that's true, but, you're flying 26 times while you're in the White House with the guy, right? Mm-hmm. The Secret Service are obviously looking at this guy, and they're looking into him, and yet they're not saying, oh, you know what, we can't have this guy with us. Like, he's clearly another intelligence agency, or, this is potentially harmful. They kind of just let it happen. So do you see what I'm saying? Like, why I think that he's like, not that I think he's intelligence, but why people would think
why people would. So I'll tell you the thing with the President of the United States. If it's a guess of the President of the United States, you're not doing anything on the person. That's a guess of the President of the United States. So Epstein will not get a background check or anything like that. That's a guess of the United States. If he's invited in, that's a whole different story. They're treated differently. Second to that is, I will tell you this, when you see a lot of these anomalies that happen, when people, he part of the scheme, he got rolled up, other people got rolled up and he didn't get rolled up. Holding secrets on people is power. Access is power. How, and you start uncovering everything with all these disgusting, sex trafficking scandals and all this stuff. Once you have the information, it's power. People are going to do everything they can to help you out. You have leverage on people, So if I have things that you don't want to come out and I run into a situation where I need you, I tell you this: if you don't help me, I'm releasing all this information. So what are you going to do? You're going to protect yourself. I think his situation, I don't believe he was intelligence. I truly believe in everything I've seen. There's plausibility. I mean, there's plausibility on both sides. I'm just going from my general senses of understanding people in power and how they want to keep that in place. Because right now I moved into politics, and so I talk with people trying to keep moving up the ladder of politics. Politics is probably one of the most dirtiest things around. They don't want their little dirty secrets to go out because it ruins their political careers. It can ruin a person right off the bat, And so, I'm not gonna, we'll never know. Epstein is sitting, far below us. That's why I think he belongs far below us for everything he's done. But we'll never know. I do know that, people do cut ties. Russians do it all the time. If you have information or a threat to, say, Putin, I mean, look at his adversary. The plane crash. I mean, everything that happened to him, or getting sick on the plane and then ending up in jail and dying. Things don't happen for a reason. That's the reality of our world. And power, when people have power, they want to stay in power. If you have information to take the power away or affect their power, they'll do whatever they need to do, which is, obviously tell a judge, back away. And when a judge says, well, I need a reason, then the reason is going to be, well, just say he's intelligence, because people will believe that. Because you gotta remember, it's whenever you design something, you have to make it plausible. It's called cover fraction, cover status. Does this make sense? Can we build something that makes sense to get them off of this and make everyone think this? And if I was in the same situation, if I was running people's campaigns and this stuff was coming out, I will find everything I can to distract from this and push everything in this direction. We do it in intelligence realm. We do it in counterintelligence all the time. We did it all the time. This is exactly what's happening, but we want everyone to believe this. And we'll create the narrative to push it into that area. And I can tell you what, people are thinking that he's intelligence, and that's why he died. Throw him off the actual reality that it's not about that. It's about all the other people, all the stuff these other people are doing that are completely horrendous and illegal. And so it's all shifting focus. I mean, politicians do it all the time. And that's just my 2 cents. We'll never know because he's not here anymore.
Well, I mean, the people around him were.
Yeah.
So I'll say that. So somebody knows.
Oh, they know. They know. But now I don't think anyone's going to say anything anymore. I think it's gone. I think it's kind of like the O.J. Simpson.
Oh, well, we never know. I mean, maybe somebody will, have a change of heart, get diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and they'll say, you know what, fine, I'm going to release all this information in the world. But who knows?
Yeah, who knows on that?
Yeah. So now, on a more positive note, what advice do you have to young people?
What's that?
What advice do you have to young people?
Young people. I'll tell you this, first and foremost, for the young people out here that's listening and you're looking at our country, our country is at a crossroads. And we're seeing the essence of American values being taken away, stripped away. We're seeing everything that, the people that you interviewed served overseas and fought for being trampled on. And, having stories like this of what we did all this in preservation of this country. I spent over 10 years, Ninja spent, 2 decades. He's older than me. He spent 2 decades. Bobby Bunch. We all spent our time overseas defending this country. And I say for the young people out there, don't let those deaths, don't let that time go in vain. I mean, cherish what this country has given you and cherish the people that actually fought for this country. And that also goes with, protecting the values and standing up. Right now, we have what's happening in these schools with Hamas and a lot of people that are just going with the flow because they don't know all the facts. The facts that Hamas is actually a terrorist network. Hamas did the most horrendous things. If Hamas just attacked Israeli Defense Force, that's one thing. But once you start going into innocent people and killing kids, killing people and rape, murder, and different things like that, you cross the line. And so when we start seeing these protests out there, we need to stand up to that, and I don't say, take up arms and go fight, but I say, stand up for what's right. Don't support these things. And if you have questions on it, go research, study, learn, talk to people that served overseas, that served in these areas, that tell you the truth. And that's all I ask for the young kids. Second to that, be ready to vote. We have to, it's important to vote. We have to vote. Our country depends on it. And educate yourself on every single thing. Just don't vote because you like Trump or you like Biden. Vote based upon what's best for our country. And that's all I have.
I think that's a good place to end off. It was good talking to you. I'm going to end the recording. We'll talk a little bit after the show.
All right. No worries.
All right. I'm going to stop screen recording. And then in 3, 2, 1.